Do you still like horror? Do you still like the 80s? Do you still like horror in the 80s? Then you'll love In Search of Darkness Part 2. It's got all new interviews with horror icons like Robert Englund, Tom Savini, Linnea Quigley, Nancy Allen, and more returning guests like John Carpenter and Doug Bradley. There's even going to be a Cinemassacre Collector's Edition, which contains exclusive artwork and a mini documentary featuring me. Click the link in the description to pre-order your Cinemassacre Collector's Edition today. Then you can get your name in the credits and priority access to a bunch of other cool perks. Don't get tricked, this treat is only available until Halloween. Good to see you again. Here we are in person.
Yes, Cretan. There's like no reason for us to be. I guess there is. It's a Halloween season, so here we are.
Yeah, well, we got our masks on, so we're safe, we're responsible, and we're going to talk monster movies, I guess. Anything Halloween, because, you know, like, look, I really wish we could do like a full Monster Madness and have it like the way it was before, but maybe next year we might be able to really bring it back.
But check out the old episodes on Cinemassacre Plays.
Yeah, oh yeah, we're posting a rerun episode every day on Cinemassacre Plays, and those are all episodes that haven't been on YouTube for a very long time, or possibly never.
Most of them are never. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just on the site.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So I wish we could have more time to do more scripted stuff and everything. But this is going to be real fun. So let's just talk about. What's your favorite horror movie by decade?
It's a good subject.
And this is tough. The 20s. A lot of people don't go back that far to watch silent horror movies.
Well, for one thing, it's hard. It's going to be hard to pick your favorite horror movie because some years, like it's like the 80s. It's like how do you pick your favorite horror movie of the 80s because there's so many good ones. Mm-hmm. But the 1920s. Yeah,
I mean, show the image right there. So you have on that screen. These are ones that I kind of picked out as I think these are some of the best. Even though the idea is we're going to choose one per decade. Like, and it doesn't even mean it's the best, it just means it's your favorite.
Okay. So what do you got?
Well, let's see. I think for me, a really tough decision is it's either Phantom of the Opera or Caligari. Because Phantom of the Opera, it's the character that I like. Like, he's just such an interesting, sort of like antisocial character who, you know, hides in this basement and, you know, he comes up to haunt people and everything. And it's just so great that he does like half the movie with the mask, but once the mask comes off, it's like all Chaney. It's all in the face and everything.
Right.
Caligari has the scenery. I think that's what I like the most about it, is that the whole movie looks like it shouldn't exist. It just looks like it's some kind of dream world.
I think like I love looking at Phantom of the Opera, like the way it looks, and like the, you know, if you ever see that Blu-ray, it's just like a beautiful like movie to look at.
Oh yeah, the Blu-ray looks amazing.
Yeah, but so my pick for the 20s it would actually be Nosferatu.
Okay.
Because that movie, honestly, out of all like the horror movies probably that we're gonna even talk about today, is probably like the most legitimately creepy fucking thing. Whenever I watch that movie or watch scenes from it or whatever, it's not often that I actually sit and watch. I have sat and watched the whole movie, but usually I just watch like parts of it or something. It's from the 1920s, so those movies seem like they're from another world. It's just like they're so displaced from reality in our world that
they don't even move the thing because like the frame rate. Sometimes they move a little like fast, and it's kind of like just a weird.
Yeah, those movies put me, all of them really, but Nosferatu, it puts me in a really weird state of mind. And then when he comes on screen, it's really legitimately creepy. And I like the Bela Lugosi Dracula and Christopher Lee and stuff, but honestly, the one that creeps me out is Nosferatu. Like, that's really creepy shit to me.
Especially for 1922, that's really creepy.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with because of how old it is.
Yeah.
But
and when they made that movie about it, God, what was it called?
Like Shadow of the Vampire?
Shadow of the Vampire, yeah. Shadow of the Vampire was basically about the making of Nosferatu, but if Max Schreck was actually a real vampire. Because that movie was made so long ago, it's like, for all we know, he could have been a real vampire.
And that's a great movie, and it you know tells the story of it. But watching the actual movie, like we'll go watch that movie and just like sit and watch it, and tell me by the end of it that you're not creeped out by that shit. I think it's creepy.
Yeah, yeah. And but if I had to choose one though, I think I'd go with Caligari because of that reason, that it's so displaced from reality. And it's so weird to look at.
That one definitely, yeah.
And even in the films that I'm releasing a short film this month, hopefully, I think, and that one is gonna, you'll notice a lot of Caligari influence in that. So that look and that mindset has never left me. So anyway, the 30s. Now you look right there. I have those are basically the 12 picks that I think are the best, but it's really hard. And the fact that we have to pick one makes it even more hard, because here's the thing. King Kong, that's my second favorite film ever. With the only one that beat it was Mad Mad World, because it's a comedy. It makes me laugh. King Kong is kind of more of a fantasy adventure film, but it has horrific moments. He's like, it's a giant monster. He's eating people. There's people in his mouth screaming.
There's definitely elements of horror.
Yeah, he's stepping on people. Fay Wray is screaming the whole movie. Like, if you just listened to that movie and heard all the screaming and roaring, it's a horror movie. But it's not usually considered a horror movie, so I almost feel like I need to pick a second one just to be safe.
Okay, sure.
If you don't accept that, then... And this is where it really gets hard, because I feel like with the 30s, I should pick something from the early 30s, because then, you know, the Hays Code, which came into effect in either 1934 or 35, I forget which, but all the horror movies before that were uncensored. So they all had something in it that was pushing the boundaries, that was really shocking. And a lot of those movies didn't have a lot of music either. So it always kind of had this really awkward and creepy tone. Then there weren't really that many in the late 30s, but then 1939 came Son of Frankenstein. And even though that's part of Universal's second phase of horror, and I feel like Son of Frankenstein's should be more associated with the 40s, if you're being technical and you want to ask me what's my favorite horror movie of the 30s, I gotta go with Son of Frankenstein.
You know what's funny is that would have been my answer for a really, really long time. Would have been Son of Frankenstein. And then I went back and I rewatched like all the Universal horror movies. But then when I was watching the Frankenstein ones, I felt like I actually ended up enjoying Bride of Frankenstein a little bit more. Just like all those scenes with like the old man and his smoking the cigar.
Yeah.
Like, I just love that stuff.
Yeah,
but
it's a tough pick.
Yeah, it's a really tough pick. And on my last viewing, I felt that I liked Bride of Frankenstein more. But that's not my answer.
And I almost picked that today. It's so hard.
My answer is Dracula.
Yeah.
Because it's like, how am I not going to pick Dracula?
I know. It's like, I feel like I should have picked Dracula.
Well, that's my pick.
Yeah. So you go with Dracula, I'll go with Son of Frankenstein. Dracula
is, I mean, we talked enough about Dracula, but it's like the most iconic performance ever.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, Bela Lugosi is Dracula, and it's just... I mean, we've talked about it before. You've explained it in Monster Madness before, but why it's a great movie. But for me personally, that was the movie that got me into horror movies. Because as a kid, I wasn't really into horror movies. I liked, watching Thundercats and stuff like that. But I remember going to Suncoast Video, and I think I'd watch like Looney Tunes cartoons and honestly, like Shredder. Like Shredder would, when he bring Krang to life, it was like, Dr. Frankenstein bringing, the monster to life and all that. So I'd see things talk, Count Chocula, things talk about Dracula, but I never saw the movie. So I was at Suncoast Video and I'm like, I could watch an old movie. And I ended up buying the movie just for the hell of it. And I loved it. And that was the first time I really, maybe not the first horror movie I ever saw, but the first time I really appreciated a horror movie was Dracula. And to this day, going back and watching it, I love that movie. And I know people are going to be like, oh, the Spanish one's better and whatever. Sure, like technically. It is. But Bela Lugosi is like, without that performance, it's like...
Yeah, if you could just take Bela Lugosi and put him in the Spanish version, then it's just amazing. Like...
I don't even know about that, though, because then you also have Dwight Fry, who's also amazing in that movie. So you also got to put him in there.
That's right. Although, but Carlos Villarreal and
they're great too, though.
Yeah. Like they're also really good.
Right.
It's in the Spanish version is technically better made, and like the shots are composed better. But
I don't disagree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, the one that people know, the one that you recognize the most is the one with Bela Lugosi.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, it was all about him, you know, and the way he portrayed the character. Sure, the sweeping shots going up the stairs in the Spanish version are better, but it's like, yeah, but Bela Lugosi.
I know.
You know. Anyway,
yeah.
So
because it's so unique, the whole movie, like the tone of it. Like I think a good example, actually, and a scene that Lugosi's not even in, that just emphasizes how surreal the movie is that when Dwight Fry's Renfield, he comes in and he says, like, she will have bad dreams, Professor Van Helsing. And then there's this long pause with no music, nothing under it, but just that static hiss that you hear in the film. And he leans over, and it takes him a really long time, and he goes, bad dreams. Woo! And then there's this wolf howl. Everybody turns to a stock shot of the full moon, or the sun setting, I think. And it's just like, that's Halloween. That's what that is.
Right?
That's class.
Yeah.
All right, now we're on to the 40s. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, I don't know, you want to go first?
I'll go first, sure.
So there's our choices on the screen there.
I had a real... This is the one I had the hardest
Or you could pick
with.
one not on there. You don't have to.
Yeah, no, mine was on there. So I had picked House of Frankenstein, but I haven't watched it in a while since we, you know...
Yeah.
Honestly, I might not watch that one since we did Monster Madness.
Yeah.
James introduced me to a lot of these movies. Like I said, I had to introduce myself, I guess, to Dracula. But later on, you know, in college and whatever, you were the first person to show me The Wolfman. I had never seen that. And when we did Monster Madness, I felt like, you know, I had already seen The Wolfman, but House of Frankenstein, it's funny, even though it's called House of Frankenstein, there's a lot of The Wolfman in it. Mm-hmm. And I felt like they delved a lot deeper into what and who the character of the Wolfman, you know, is, and Lon Chaney Jr. and his performance about it, and the things that they sort of delve deeper into. It actually gets very dark and very sad, and that kind of touched more of a core with me than the original Wolfman, or like, and then Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is you know, is a very fun movie and whatnot, but the one that really was like kind of like emotionally moved me a little bit was actually House of Frankenstein, more so than the other one. So that was my pick out of these. But these are great. I almost picked Jekyll and Hyde because I'm sorry, this is the 40s version. I'm sorry, I like the 30s version.
That was another one from the 30s. It's almost like But anyway, we're on the 40s.
But what was your pick?
It was a toss-up between The Wolfman or Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. And I'm going with Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman because that was the first one I ever saw. And that's what got me into these movies. And it has that opening cemetery scene. And then the end, it has the battle between the two monsters. And that's really like the best time you ever see the monsters fight. I don't know. Like this one seems a little more solid. It's a little more well put together. But I really love House of Frankenstein too. But I feel like if you're going to start out, I mean, probably Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein because it's a comedy.
Sure,
that's a good way to get in.
Starting spot. Yeah.
But I feel like that one's kind of separate to me because it is all comedy. Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is really like the most.
It's a good intro to that stuff.
Yeah. And I feel like watching all those sequels is a really fun experience every time because when you go from that to House of Frankenstein and then you see all the weird continuity errors and everything, and like, which by the way, I notice more of like every time I watch them. There's like more things that don't add up, like the names of the towns reverse and stuff. Like he travels from Visaria to like the village of Frankenstein, but then the next movie he once again travels from Visaria to the Frankenstein village. It's like, wait a minute, like where are they? What's going on here? And then that whole brain swapping thing is so crazy. But,
you know, I have to say, probably My favorite thing that we've ever done in the history of Cinemassacre was the year when we reviewed all of those Frankenstein movies.
Yeah.
Probably it has a lot to do with the fact of how much I love those movies.
Yeah.
But sitting and editing those was enormously fun.
Yeah.
Because just to be able to look to those movies and delve into those movies that much, but also for me to be able to like kind of put together your words and sort of your sort of obsessions like that of the kind of stuff you're talking about, because you went so deep into so many little details and things. It was really fun for me to go find all those like clips and stuff like that, and it made me like appreciate all that even more. Like Monster Madness was such a is an education in horror for me, because even though you wrote the stuff, for me as editing it all. Because for any of you guys out there that ever like did video editing, you know that you could watch a movie, but when you edit and write a review or something about it, you learn so much more about it, and it really, really gave me such a respect for those movies, and I just love them. And not to go off subject of our favorites. And my pick was House of Frankenstein, but The Body Snatcher, by the way, also. Everybody's going to point out, the Bela Lugosi Karloff scene is not very good, whatever. But the movie itself, that's a good movie, and Boris Karloff's really good in it, I think.
He's really good.
Yeah, that's a good one, too.
Okay, so with the 50s, it's kind of interesting, because it wasn't really the decade of horror. It was more like the decade of science fiction. And these picks that we have up on the screen, you'll notice there's not as many, but that's because I broke it into different categories. So this category we're looking at right now is Alien Invaders. And also Plan 9 from Outer Space is on there as a choice, because that's technically considered a bad movie, but it's so bad it's good, which is why it gets on the list.
This is where it gets messy, because it's a little hard, because these movies have some horror elements to them. Like obviously, like Plan 9 from Outer Space has Bela Lugosi in a fucking Dracula costume,
and zombies,
or The Thing. It's like that. He's like a monster.
Yeah, he's stuck.
But these definitely lean a lot more towards science fiction, I'd say.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard to pick those on the list.
Monsters on the loose. So, of course, you have giant monsters like Godzilla, and then you have human-sized monsters like Creature from the Black Lagoon. And, of course, you got to have a so bad it's good one in there like Giant Claw.
You put a piece of shit.
Yeah, just to say, it's like, look, I'm not serious, but it's like this is...
So the giant monster thing.
But I love that movie. So it's because this is about your favorite. It's not really about what's the best.
What's technically the best, right.
Yeah. Then we have science experiments gone wrong. So, like, The Incredible Shrinking Man and Forbidden Planet, which is about a science experiment, even though it's set in space.
Yeah.
You might think of it as an alien movie, but there's no real aliens, because it's a travel to a separate planet. So if anything, we're the aliens. The Fly, of course, and I mean, there they are, all right there.
Also, Vincent Price is there again with the Tingler.
So there's also another category of 50s, which is actual horror, because like there did exist some straight up horror films, like the Hammer films, for instance. I think among those, the three that they made at the end of the 50s was Horror of Dracula, Curse of Frankenstein, and The Mummy. So I almost feel tempted to pick a Hammer film, but I don't really think of them as, like, when I think the 50s, I usually think more monsters. But what about you? So do you want to pick, like, just to pick one from the 50s of, like, everything?
I know, it's hard. That's why I said it. It's like, for me, it was hard to pick one from the 80s. So, but that's our job here, is to pick one. I know it's hard. So I had thought a lot about it. I also had trouble with the 50s. So I was thinking about picking The Tingler, more because out of all those movies, I just really enjoy... I mean, I like all these movies, but like I really enjoy watching The Tingler, and I think I really... Like, back when we were like in college, I was more like, oh, Bela Lugosi and stuff, but like... through Monster Madness and doing all that, like, I gained such an appreciation for Vincent Price, and like, I love him in that movie, and I love The Tingler itself, and the idea of it, and the whole like you have to scream to get rid of the Tingler, and all that, and the whole idea, and I know you're into it with all the stuff that they did in the theater.
you will feel some of the physical reactions, the shocking sensations experienced by the actors on the screen.
And the thing is, we've reviewed all this stuff before, so this is just, we're talking about our personal feelings and stuff. So, like, if you want to see our, like, scripted reviews or whatever, you know, you can go watch the old videos. But basically, that's my pick, The Tingler. I really enjoy that movie. And I like that there's that color scene in it, too, in the bathtub. I think that, like, back then, that was very original to have something like that. Because you could go back and you could think of, like, The Wizard of Oz, who it's like, it's got the black and white, and then it's got the color. But this is a black and white scene with color.
And like, not to mention, is it it's a bathtub full of blood, isn't it?
Which is gory,
like red blood in a black and white film with a red bloody hand coming up out of the tub. Or it's been a while since I've seen it. But, But
and it's really hard to pick a favorite out of all these. Like I said, I love The Tingler so much. Horror of Dracula is definitely my favorite of the 1950s, and it's hard because that when I think the 50s, I think like the black and white stuff usually. I know the blobs and color and whatever, but it was sort of that mixture where it went from black and white to color a lot. So I a lot of times I think of the Hammer Dracula movies as more like 60s and 70s because most of them are like from then, I guess, mostly from the 60s, I guess. That's my favorite of all those movies. I mean, I really love the Hammer Dracula movies, but like I mean, we could go on about that for a long time, but like I absolutely love that movie. That's just a classic horror film. Curse of you know, the Frankenstein. You know, that's also really good. But I love Peter Cushing in those movies. Christopher Lee's like great as fucking Dracula. But like Peter Cushing is the one who's like really in most of the movies and most of the movie in like all those movies. He's got the like most dialogue. And then when you know, Christopher Lee comes on screen, it's usually very, like, he'll give one really iconic line and then he's gone, kind of, which is cool. But, like, for me, those movies are those are, like, Peter Cushing movies to me. And I love everything about it. I love the portrayal of all the characters, the style of them, the look of them, the atmosphere, just everything about it. Like, if you haven't seen those movies now when it gets to some of the later ones like Scars of Dracula and stuff, they're not quite as you know great, but like the first couple are so good, and Horror of Dracula is just, I think, one of the most classic horror movies ever made. So that was my pick. What do you got to go for?
Well, mine is so hard. I mean it's I mean the three that I'm narrowing it down to, I will pick one, is The Thing, obviously. And also for everybody who gives a very Google answer to it, yes, the full title is The Thing from Another World, but everybody calls it The Thing. On the posters, The Thing is the words that are bigger. It always says The Thing in large letters. You just look at all the posters and everything. It's like saying, oh, He-Man, that's not called He-Man, that's called He-Man Masters of the Universe.
Well, yeah, like the name of the show is Masters of the Universe, but it's like, and then sometimes like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, so anyway, that's just...
Everybody calls it fucking He-Man.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it's
so
always,
The Thing.
It's always been The Thing up until like the internet, I guess.
Okay.
But that's close to being my favorite because it just has that like that chilling mood to it. I mean, it's like literally chilling because it's in ice all the time, and it's isolated and
it's isolated.
Yeah. Isolated. And by the way, that
you sounded like Vincent Price with that laugh right there.
That's right. And the remake is very different, so you could say that those are two polar opposites because one is in the
you fucker,
because one's in the Arctic and one's in the Antarctic. They actually are set on different
You need
poles.
to chill out.
I need to chill out. Well, you know what, Mike? It's been ice to see.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, James. What happened to the dinosaurs? The Ice Age! Okay.
The Blob is also a good one. And there's a line in that movie that really resonates these days because of how shitty this year's been and everything, where he says, tomorrow the sun's going to shine like good old yesterday. Good old yesterday. And that line really sticks. It always has. It always stuck with me. But now it really does. I love the 50s setting. That, I mean, it's made in the 50s, but most of these movies don't really show, like they take place in the future, or like they don't really embrace the decade in which they exist in. Whereas the Blob, it's centered around it's centered around like young kids, even though they're not played by. They're supposed to be teenagers, but they're much older, especially Steve McQueen.
Right.
But still, it's like a movie where like the young people are the heroes. But
it feels like that movie feels like the 1950s. It's got the teenagers in the cars and everything. The stuff that you think of in your head when you think 1950s. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But the one I think I have to pick is Godzilla, because what's the monster that you remember the best from the 50s? Godzilla.
That's true.
Yeah.
We've talked a little about Godzilla.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
All right, now on to the 60s. Do any of those stick out to you? Because
once again, this is a very hard video to do. Just so you guys know, it's so hard to pick a favorite.
It is,
and I do my live streams, and people always ask me, "What's your favorite of this? What's your favorite of this?" So if you guys see this video, you'll know my favorite, I guess. Finally, but it's between Night of the Living Dead and House of Usher. Mm-hmm. And Night of the Living Dead is definitely my favorite zombie movie, without a doubt.
Yeah, because me, it's that or Psycho.
Yeah.
I'll pick one after.
Oh, that's why it was going to be Night of the Living Dead or Psycho. Yeah. But now seeing on this list House of Usher. House of Usher is actually one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And again, I love Vincent Price. I love watching Vincent Price. Mm-hmm. Something about him and how he acts is so goddamn captivating. Yeah. I can't look away. Even some of the movies he's in where I feel like the movie itself, like the scripts aren't that good. Mm-hmm. When he's on screen, given his lines, I'm mesmerized by him. Yeah. And that movie though, House of Usher, is a great movie though. Mm-hmm. It's him in a great movie, and it's got a great scene in it that I always think about. It's the scene where there are paintings on the walls, and he's going through family member by family member and listing them off. And these it's almost like being in the Haunted Mansion or something. And he's got all the different family members on the walls, and he's like, this one was the axe murderer, and this one, and he's got these great stories to go along with each one of them. But then there's a lot of moments in the movie that are just dead silent, because he has a condition or something that he can't hear. He doesn't want to hear any sounds that are loud at all, even tiptoeing and things. He can hear. He has this ultra sensitive hearing. So it just has this mood and this atmosphere to it that is unlike just anything. It is the most atmospheric movie of any movie I can think of. When I watch that movie, it puts me in a place that I just forget about reality, and I'm in that movie. I melt into that movie when I'm watching it. I absolutely love that movie. Yeah.
And this was the first of the Roger Corman Poe adaptations.
Yeah, and
so this is really this is the movie that it was Roger Corman's first big hit. Well, it's like I said, it's between Night of the Living Dead or Psycho. I think Night of the Living Dead, it's got to be that one, because it's so uncharacteristic of a black and white horror film to be so gruesome. Even though it's not as quite as gruesome as a lot of newer zombie movies, but still, it's there's a scene where they're eating the bones, and they're picking the flesh off. One's got an arm in his mouth, and there's the intestines on the ground that the zombies are fighting over. It's a gruesome movie. Oh, not to mention the little girl stabbing her mom to death. Yeah. I mean, this you look back at this, and it almost seems like when it starts off, it's got kind of this this really low budget black and white look to it. It's not just old and black and white, but it's also independently made, very very low budget and crude. And some of the dialogue in the beginning when they're in the car, it kind of comes off as a little awkward, sort of. But then the zombies come in, and then the movie gets so serious and so gruesome. You're just whoa, you're stunned by it. And
my takeaway with Night of the Living Dead was always, once they're inside the house, the drama that builds up inside that house is so well done. That's my favorite part of the movie. It's not so much the zombies and the throwing the Molotov cocktails and that stuff. It's really the interaction between the characters in the house. Just great
Yeah.
Just the way it was done.
And without giving away everything, in case somebody hasn't seen it, it takes risks. Like there's some serious risks that like plot wise would not happen in a major movie, and it's because of those risks and how it was independently made is what makes it so influential. Like, because when I've made movies, I always thought about Night of the Living Dead. I'm like, oh, well, these guys can do it. And, like, they're not in Hollywood. They're out in, like, Pittsburgh. And it's like, okay, well, anybody anywhere can make a movie. And here's what you do. And I just thought that was really inspiring.
Yeah, like, one time James and I went to the Night of the Living Dead cemetery.
That was a good video, too.
And I actually found the same stick on the ground that was actually in the movie.
The stick, yeah.
It was the same one.
Yeah, that was a good video, yeah. So here's my curating of the 70s here. So, again, hope I did it justice. There's plenty that I leave out on these things, because you can only put so much. I didn't want to go overboard, but
man, the 70s.
See, I almost picked Halloween. I was like, Halloween is such an iconic horror film. It puts you into the Halloween season and mindset. But Jaws. I mean, Jaws is just that's just where it's at.
You're going Jaws?
Yeah.
Jaws is a good one. So I had a hard time with this one. It was very, very, very hard for me to not pick Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That movie, defines, 70s horror to me. And it's, out of all of those big horror characters, I guess, what do they call them? The big four, Michael Myers, Freddy, Leatherface. Jason, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That's my favorite of them. Because I think that first Texas Chainsaw Massacre is way scarier than any of the rest of those.
Oh yeah, it's horrific.
Yeah, it's absolutely the first one, to be specific. The first one. So it was very hard for me to not pick that, but I had to go with Alien because Alien is one of the best movies ever. And
and it is a horror film set in space. It really is more horror than science fiction, even though you look at it and it's in space and it looks all science fiction. But if you just took the same plot, put it in a haunted house instead of a spaceship, then it's a horror film.
You're absolutely right about that. And I used to feel differently about that. I used to be like, oh man, it's in space. It's it's more of a sci-fi movie. But I don't feel that way anymore.
Aliens is the sequel,
right? More
like an action sci-fi. But
true.
But the original, it's straight up horror.
So I love it though because it's and this is kind of almost, I feel dumb talking about it because who the hell hasn't seen Alien? If you haven't seen Alien, turn this off and go watch Alien. By the way, but the thing I love about this movie is really just it's simple. It's the suspense of it. Mm-hmm. It's the most suspenseful movie I've ever seen.
The whole build up when they go into the spaceship, how long it takes for them to find the alien. It's so good.
It's just so well done. So that's my pick.
So now we're going to talk about the 80s. Now the 80s is all over the place.
Yeah,
and you can see that in the In Search of Darkness documentary that I'm in. And the upcoming second one.
Okay.
That there is just unlimited films in the 80s.
Yeah.
And they're all so different. And lots of them are sort of debatable if they're horror. So that's what made this really tricky. So look at this first page we got up there. This is kind of my picks of the ones that are straight up horror.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could have some comedy in them. But for the most part, these are horror. And now these ones are more comedy.
Horror comedy.
They tend to have more comedy in them, yeah. So
it's funny you had Evil Dead on each, but the Evil Dead 2 you have is more comedy.
Yeah, like Evil Dead 1 was more horror, and then Evil Dead 2 is more comedy. But the thing is with Evil Dead 2, it's still horror. See, some of the other ones like Ghostbusters and Gremlins, I feel they have horror elements, but they're not full horror enough because the debate that I had was, should I pick Gremlins? Because Gremlins is in my top 10 films.
Right.
And I'm like...
I almost picked that too.
Yeah, I'm like, I should pick Gremlins, but if you really ask me, what do I think is the best 80s horror, or at least what's my favorite as far as an 80s horror movie goes, Evil Dead 2. It's just it has the greatest camera work ever, possibly.
Right.
The camera's flying through the back of the car window, and then it comes out the front window. And just the creativity of it, where they would like put the camera on sticks and stuff, and they would run around, and that they were all friends, and like Sam Raimi would just torture Bruce Campbell throughout the whole movie, and like, I mean,
it's entertaining and hilarious.
Yeah, and you could tell that it was a nightmare to make that movie. Like the whole time, like Bruce Campbell, he's like covered in like blood and mud and sweat and everything. He's got like monster blood flying on him. It's like they just put him through hell to make that movie, but the humor in it, it's like it's so funny, on top of actually being legitimately scary at times too.
Looking at all these movies and the list, on both these pages, it's like it's so much.
You know what? It's impossible.
Yeah, it's like an impossible thing. Like I'm thinking about Ghostbusters. The scary scene in Ghostbusters to me was always when Dana's in the chair and she gets like sucked into the refrigerator and stuff. But
that scared me as a kid.
Me too. It's scary. A lot of these movies that are like horror comedies have like there'll be 1 or 2 parts in the movie that are actually like scary. But my pick was actually it was gonna be Gremlins because I love Gremlins so much. It's such a funny movie. It really defines. Mm-hmm. It's one of those movies that like defines it's like Pac-Man. It's like Pac-Man, Gremlins. Like it's one of those things. But with Gizmo. Gizmo is like an icon of the 80s.
Yeah.
But my favorite, and again this is hard because it's 1980. It's because it's almost 70s, but it's not.
Oh, the movie. Yeah.
So, The Shining,
is
my favorite because that's one of my favorite horror movies. Always has been. Mm-hmm. I know people have a problem with it because of how it is in the book and the movie versus the movie. Whatever.
It's all about Jack.
It's all about Jack, and it's just an entertaining movie. It is It is slow. It's Kubrick, but it's just.
But so is Dracula. It's like it's a performance that just is so good.
Yeah.
And that slowness of it makes it creepier too.
The argument about the book versus the movie. It's like it's two different fucking things.
Yeah.
And the movie is very entertaining movie in its own right.
Oh, and they made a sequel to.
You know what? I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard it's really good. Do you like it?
It's pretty good. I mean, it's worth watching.
Okay.
I mean, don't expect The Shining, but it's good.
I wouldn't. Right.
Yeah, because it's basically like not Jack Torrance. Tommy was his name. Tommy, the kid.
Danny boy.
Yeah, Danny boy. He's now it's basically about him. Like he's grown up now and he goes back to the hotel and stuff. But yeah, it's all right. This is the 90s. And I think at the time when the 90s was going on, that's when I first really got into horror films. But I wasn't watching the ones in the 90s as much as I was going back to watching classics and catching up, basically.
Yeah.
So at the time, I would have been like, oh, well, the 90s doesn't really have anything good. But looking back, it really does.
So my top one was Dead Alive.
Oh, that's on there. I called it Brain Dead.
Oh, Brain Dead.
Because the New Zealand title, and I think everywhere else it's called Brain Dead, but in America at least we called it Dead Alive for some reason. You
know what? So, I wouldn't have used the picture of the baby. That's why, in my head, it's always the lawnmower.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, Dead Alive, just, man, that movie blew my fucking mind when I saw it, because it was like the goriest thing I'd ever seen to that point, and it still pretty much is the goriest thing.
I think it might be. I think they actually, I mean, there's an estimated, gallon, they actually counted the gallons of blood that's in it, and it has more gallons of blood.
Yeah, I believe it. And, It's a really entertaining movie. It's like a horror comedy. There are several moments in that movie that are absolutely hilarious. Like laugh out loud, bust your gut. Like really fucking funny shit happens in that movie, and it's at least to me, because I have a dark sense of humor, I guess. But there's shit in there that's fucked up, really fucked up, and you'll fucking laugh your ass. Like the fucking baby, and he's swinging the fucking baby and against the fucking pole and shit. It's so fucked up, but it's
I kick ass for the Lord.
Yeah, it's just such a fun movie but at the same time, it's really like gross and gory, and it's just.
I like the shot when the bum with the liquor bottle, or whatever. And he's watching the baby get beat. He's like, yeah.
It's like rooting it on. Yeah, that's such a fucking good movie. And the very end of it, where he's with the lawnmower, and just he's going after everything, just like limbs going everywhere, and like there's a hand going into like a fucking blender and shit, and it's just like it's so over the top. It's so entertaining. Yeah. It almost reminds me like of a Trauma thing. Yeah, like it's kind of like at the end of like a Poltergeist. It gets kind of like that. It's one of those.
See, the 90s, you can go almost any direction. Like, if you want to go with, like, performance, like, who gives, like, the best performance, it's got to be, like, Hannibal Lecter and Anthony Hopkins. But that's not the direction I'm going. I'm going more with, I think my favorite, honestly, is From Dusk Till Dawn. Because, I mean, Robert Rodriguez and Tarantino were, like, the two most influential filmmakers I can think of from the 90s. And their style was so different, and I like the acting with George Clooney and Tarantino as like they're two brothers who are criminals. It's just an interesting dynamic. Like I like when movies are centered around characters who are bad. But George Clooney's character, I forget their names. I think it's Seth or some. He's trying to be fair. Like when they kidnap somebody, he tries to be fair with them. Like, look, we're going to let you go if you do what you say. But then Tarantino's character always fucks it up, and then they end up having to like murder the person or something, or it's like every step of the way he gets them in so much trouble, and then by the end of the movie they're in a bar with a bunch of vampires and it's just like, okay, how could this go any worse for them? It's like nothing went to plan. It's good, and the commentary is so funny. Tarantino, it's like the only commentary I think he ever did. And he is so funny to listen to on that. So anyway, now we're moving on to Millennium Horror now, but we're going to separate into 2000s and 2010s. The picture up here is a mix of 2000s and 2010s. So this is all Millennium Horror. But what we're going to do is pick one from each decade, like we've been doing. So the 2000s.
I haven't seen as many 2000s horrors probably as I should. So I had to go off of the ones that I've seen.
You know what? That's exactly mine, because I haven't had as much time to watch the newer ones. So there's probably a lot I left out just because I haven't seen them.
I mean, James and I are still working on watching all the movies from like the 1920s here. So, we're a little late. But so I went with The Orphan. See, so spoiler alert. I'm going to have to ruin this, so if you don't want me to ruin it, like, this is your spoiler. So it's the one where basically they adopt a little girl, she comes home, and then the little girl, you're like, oh god, this little girl is like a real piece of shit, because she's, giving the other kids a hard time, and she gets real violent and things. And then and she's like real fucking dark. She's keeping like this Bible that's like secret and shit. And you're like, what the fuck is the deal with this little girl? And then later in the movie, she starts murdering people. And the little kids are like, the one like little girl like knows like what's going on. But she, the orphan girl, she's like making sure like that the fucking little girl doesn't say anything. So now she has the little girl working with her to do fucked up shit. Mm-hmm. She's like, get the hammer or do this and do that. So, but the little girl like doesn't want to be doing it. So it's like really fucked up. But then basically they start to figure out that this like little girl is like evil, and then at a certain point in the movie, there's like this big plot twist where, again, spoiler alert, but basically they find out there's like an escaped person from like a Russian insane asylum, and this person is like this insane person, but it's also somebody that like has this syndrome that they don't really age. So the little girl is actually not a little girl. She's actually like a 40-year-old like serial killer that they've like adopted and brought into their family. So we talk about, like the 1960s and how like Psycho is like this like psychological like sort of thriller, and Norman Bates is like a psychopath. The Orphan like is really like a movie about like a psychopath, and a psychopathic killer. And I think I thought it was a very, very good movie, and that had to be my pick. Although, again, I do want to reiterate that there's probably a lot more horror movies that I need to really see. So if we were to make this video again in 15 years, I might have a different answer, but that's my answer as of right now. So
once again, I think all these are really good, but the two that it comes down to, I'm having trouble with the Devil's Rejects. I really love that one because, I mean, the thing is, I loved it, but it's not a movie that I watch often because it's so disturbing.
It really is, yeah.
But it's basically another movie where it's all about bad characters, and you're just stuck with these like horrible psychopaths, and the things they do to people are so awful. But then there's like these funny scenes where they're talking about the ice cream and whatever. Yeah. So I think it's a really dark but humorous kind of movie. So I kind of like the mix of horror and
that movie is really fucking dark.
Yeah, it really is. But it's really good. I think it's by far the best Rob Zombie movie. But I think the one I'm gonna go with that's my favorite from the 2000s is Trick or Treat. Because that one, the whole movie looks like Halloween. That, I could put that on every year. And like anytime you want to get into the Halloween mood, I mean, that's the movie to do it. Because there's so much orange in it. Like they're just walking on the streets and like you just see every sidewalk has pumpkins that are lit everywhere. Like there's probably more jack-o'-lanterns in this movie.
If you want to get into the mood, it's a good one. It's another one like Halloween itself, that it's like a very good Halloween movie.
Yeah. But it's even more Halloween than Halloween. It's probably the most Halloween movie ever made. So I think for that reason I gotta pick it. I hope they do another one. Like I've heard talk that they might, but
that'd be cool.
Yeah, because it's an anthology film. I mean, it's an anthology, but they all kind of connect.
Yeah,
the stories connect. But I would love to see more movies like that just take on the idea of Halloween and exploit that. On to the last decade, the 2010s. Well, I hope it's not really the last decade. But it's
Never know.
Yeah, it's the last decade of horror that just closed. So you could pick something as recent as December 31st, 2019, if you want. I don't know of one from then, but
so it was between two for me, and one I just saw the other day, but I really liked it, so I'm going to throw it in there. So I saw A Quiet Place, which I actually really liked it. It has like Jim from The Office in it, which I never thought of him being in a horror movie. It's a little weird, and I think he also like wrote and directed it. But I enjoyed that a lot because it kind of seemed like very classic sort of horror, and it almost had like a Star Trek sort of twist to it at the end with how they defeat the monster and all that. So I enjoyed that movie, and I also think it really helped. It's called The Quiet Place, so the whole movie they have to stay quiet, and I felt like that helped it to where nobody really got too annoying or anything because everybody has to fucking stay quiet, and it also is very suspenseful, the things that like happen. Like there's a scene where like the monster comes down into the basement, and like the mother has to hide.
They're kind of like spiders almost.
Yeah, they're almost like the spider alien things, and like there's a lot of like hiding from the aliens and whatever. And I thought that was very good. But the one that probably I remember that I think it was from, I hope I'm right, but I think it's from 2016. It's called Don't Breathe.
Oh, that's so good.
I think I'm going to pick that one because...
I almost picked that one, yeah.
Yeah, like, that movie, basically they're robbing this guy's house, but then it turns out the guy is like ready for it, I guess. And then he ends up fucking them up. And I don't even want to spoil that movie because it was so
you don't want to, because at first you're not rooting for these people because they're robbing a guy's house, and it's like so the people who you follow are bad, but once the guy in the house starts,
he's like 1,000 times worse.
Yeah, and it's like, oh my god. And but it gets like really sick too because he's trying to like impregnate her because he lost his child or something and that's what drove him insane.
Basically, these like low level crooks, they picked the wrong house to rob. Basically.
Oh god, yeah. And I think like the art of the chase is like perfected in that movie because there's so many times where it's like, okay, she's gonna get away here, and then it's like, oh nope, something else happens, and it's always like keeping you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah. It's a very good movie.
Yeah.
So that's my pick. What do you got?
I mean, that's a good pick. I mean, I also thought about like, It Follows and all the Jordan Peele movies. I think my favorite like director of horror these days, looks like he's gonna go on to do good stuff. I think if he keeps it up, is Jordan Peele, because he made Get Out and Us, and those movies are really creepy, but they also have a lot of interesting content, and like there's some dark humor in them too. He brought back The Twilight Zone, and that was pretty good. But I think if you're just gonna pick what is the horror movie that I guess is my favorite, because I feel like my favorite, I'm just going to go with the one that scared the shit out of me the most. It's Hereditary. Like, I have never seen anything that fucked up. Yeah. That movie just really bothered me. And I was like, wow, it was the first time I had a nightmare after watching a horror film since I was a kid. So like, I was like, wow, that's amazing that a movie could still do that for me. More, please. Give me more of this.
That's funny. Yeah, it didn't. Yeah. I heard a lot about that. That movie didn't really.
You told me it didn't really get me.
It didn't really get me, actually. And I mean, it actually didn't. I'm not trying to be like, oh, look at me. I'm trying, like, there's movies that have, though. Have you ever seen to talk about, like, really, because like a lot of times people like ask that, they're like, yeah, but like what really scares you, like what really like terrifies you, and like going through all these like horror movies, like I said at the beginning, like Nosferatu actually really does creep me out. But as far as like you can get into like the really like fucked up like horror movies, there's like like the Human Centipede and shit like that. But one that really fucked with me was I think it's called Audition. Have you seen Audition?
Oh, I know what it is. I know Tarantino picked it as like one of his favorites too.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever actually watched the whole thing, or at least I can't remember it.
It's very disturbing.
Yeah, it's because it's kind of like a torture porn movie. It's one of those type of things.
By the end of it, yeah. But really, that stuff happens like at the end, and it doesn't really go on too long. Most of the movie isn't really that. But that one really fucked with me. And I said this before in another video, but there was the movie, The Taking of Deborah Logan. That one fucked with me because it was about like Alzheimer's, and it was like Alzheimer's / demonic possession, and that one got to me. But would you say Hereditary is the one that really got, like, what horror movie are you like kind of a little afraid to put on? I guess is the question.
That's the only one, really. I mean, now I'm not like I've seen it, but like now I'm not like afraid to put it on. Right. But actually, it's a good one to watch again, because you'll notice there's more like plot connections. Like they put little hidden things in it that make sense when you watch the second time.
Oh, the second time through, yeah.
Yeah, so it is a really good one for that. But that was the thing, is that everybody. Anytime I would be asked, like, well, what's the scariest movie you ever saw? I never had an answer until I watched Hereditary. And when Babadook came out, everybody
I wasn't that.
Yeah, everybody was saying,
it was okay.
The writer, the director of The Exorcist, William Friedkin, or it was the writer, William Peter Blatty. Either one of those said this was the scariest movie they ever saw.
Oh, hold up a second.
And
There's a movie that I just fucking thought of that is totally fucked up. I'm not going to know the name of it, but I'm going to put it on screen right here. This mother gets surgery on her face, and she has 2 kids. And they live out in like the middle of nowhere, like a lot of these horror movies, and it's just them. And there's like nobody else around. And she's like, it's a nice family, whatever, but then after she gets the surgery, she starts being like awful towards them. And basically, you find out that, like, once again, it's not her, And these 2 little kids have to deal with this fucking mother, this, like, deformed, like, mother out in this house. And, I don't want to, like, give too much away, but that's, like, the general kind of gist of what this movie is. That movie is fucked up. And also, if I had to pick the most fucked up horror movie of all time, because we have to talk a little bit about those too. Like that fucking Human Centipede shit. Those movies are fucked up.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of those kind of movies too. If you want to like go into just fucked up stuff. I was actually
kind of impressed with the Human Centipede. How it wasn't like all that. Like they didn't really show it as much. It was more like just a good suspenseful horror movie.
Yeah.
With a really sick premise, but it was like, you know. I think it was well made. I never seen the sequels or anything like that, but I heard it gets really ridiculous.
I saw this. I was actually talking about the second one.
Okay.
It's even worse.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But the first one I thought was good.
Yeah.
But I mean, because like after Babadook, I was like, okay, if people say that's scary, and I don't think it's scary, then I feel like there's no such thing as a scary movie for me until I saw Hereditary. So. Yeah, I think the scene that did it for me in Hereditary, it was at the end. Like, I mean, it kept accelerating. It kept getting more and more momentum. But at the end, when she's in the room and like it's all dark, and then those people started kind of appearing in the doorways, like your eyes adjusting, and you kind of don't see them, but then you see them. And then when she did that thing like on the bottom of the attic door where she's like banging her head really, really fast, I was like, oh God, what the fuck? And, it was just like, yeah, that movie bugged me out. And like the soundtrack, I think, like just the way they play on your feelings with the sound and everything.
It's bugging me out, man.
It's bugging me out, man. What movie is that?
It's a Madman World.
Oh, you're bugging me, man. You're bugging me.
Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. This was just a little idea that we thought you'd like, because people always ask us our favorites. So, again, I will say our favorites are probably subject to change. So, in 5 years from now, when you're watching a video and we say something different, hey,
it'll change.
Like favorites change.
Yeah, the hardest thing is because I made a 50 favorite films list, and it's like if I pick something like, King Kong was number 2 on that list. Gremlins was somewhere in the top 10.
So how could it not?
Jaws was in there. So if I picked another horror movie but ranked it above that one, it's like, well, wait a minute. Is that a horror movie? Is that like, some people
You're going to get emails.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right.